started Hirayat and my first poetry book, I actually didn't know that it would have another 8 books to it and that the whole series would be called The Memoirs of a Remnant of Heaven and Hell. I didn't. I honestly did not know that. And I can leave a picture of the cover for what I envision it to be for all of the combined books. And I can leave some for the trilogies as well because the artist did a really good job, especially with the first one, Mortala. And I'll break down what all of these things mean. I have my laptop especially just for that. So I can tell you this, when I published this one, the first one, at first I thought, what if my old classmates see me, they'll be like, they'll probably judge me or whatever. And I told God, I was like, but what if it actually helps someone? What if it makes someone feel less lonely in this big wide world full of people? And they're like, okay, no, finally someone gets me. Someone can word things the way I do. And I know a lot of Christians are going to hate the first 3 because they're incredibly dark, even the first 6 probably, because they associate the spirit realm and all these things to just good things. But there are brutal truths about it, Like there is something I wrote in the first and second book about how I can see demons that are baptizing each other in blood. And it's nothing different to what you can see today in church with false prophets. And when I'm breaking that down, I'm basically saying when the demons are baptizing each other in blood, it's because there are pastors that are under the influence of demons that are using a river of blood, which would be the message of heaven and hell, and promoting wars like Israel and Gaza and Palestine and all that stuff. And they're asking people to get baptized in the name of such violence and brutality, even the war with Russia and Ukraine. And I don't want to talk about that too much because that's not my place. I don't like war, and I don't think it should be used as a conduit to preach the gospel of Jesus, because if he's the Prince of Peace, then we should not be preaching the message of war or the gospel of war to promote the book of Revelation or to promote church membership on behalf of people. I just don't think that's the way to go. That's why I wrote that line. And even at the time, I didn't really realize why I was writing it, but there was a lot of feeling that I had that, I'm trying to unravel a lot of messed up stuff that's happening, not only in church, but in society, in politics. And that's why I wrote most of these first 3, 4, 5, 6 books, And that's why, like, if you're baptizing someone in the name of wars and doom and gloom and raptures and stuff like that, you're basically baptizing people in the name of not Jesus' blood, but the innocent blood that's being shed because of these wars. And you're the catalyst that's fueling more for these wars. The church is, and I blame the church quite a lot, because you're having people promote this culture on the basis that Jesus is going to come back again. Why? That's completely contradictory to what Jesus has preached in the Gospels. Either which way, when I wrote this first book and I published it, I felt like I hadn't done anything. And I was like, people around me changed. They were like, I can't believe you're finally an author or whatever. I was like, first of all, it's self-published anyway. But if you really think that, I don't think my job is done. Because one book feels very incomplete for me. And that's when even I wrote the second one and I wrote the third one and I published. Once all 3 were actually published on Amazon, especially the third one, I was like, I still feel like nothing's been done. And it just feels incomplete, That's when I wrote another 3. I was in a village in India for 3 months and I wrote the 3 books here with gray pages that you see. And then when I was in America and a little bit of my time in India, I wrote these 3 books. Fun fact, I wrote these 3 and I wrote these last 3 poetry books at the same time. I was writing 6 books at the same time for a few months. And I remember there was a day I took a girl out on a date and I kind of got upset. I was just like bored out of my mind. And I was like, buddy, please. Sent her home. I went home, and from about 5 p.m. to 5 a.m., 6 a.m., I was actually writing material for all three of these books and all three of these books. I was like back and forth. I was like, this section that I wrote, it goes for this book. And they were all assorted in folders in my notes app on my phone. Believe it or not, all of these books used to just sit on my phone. They still do, actually, believe it or not. I have some 13, 14, 1500 notes on my phone right now, and they're all like half of those notes are basically just manuscripts, at least half. I know all of these are like 100 notes each, give or take, so that's 400 notes. And then these are, take the better average of like 50 per book. That's 50 into 9 would be 450, so that's 1,000 notes right there, approximately. 1,000 notes of just what I've written, and another like 100 here and there of like video ideas that I have and whatnot. So I was like, okay, this part goes into this book. What I wrote just now is for this book. And I was assorting poetry and the devotional stuff. And sometimes even there would be, I remember that night there would be something I wrote in poetry because of my relationship with God. And I was just like, oh, but this is a good lesson based off of this one line or one stanza. It's a good lesson for something in the devotional. And I swear it was like the Holy Spirit touched my mind for like 13 hours straight, 12, 13 hours, where I was just writing. And truth be told, my poetry, all of these books, are a result of my relationship with God, my prayer life with God. Because I call them painful prayers. All of my poetry is just painful prayers that I've had with God, where I'm just like, you know, I don't like the way this situation is. I don't like the fact that I feel so distant from you. I don't like the gospels that I've been hearing or the sermons that I've been hearing, because they seem contradictory to who I know you to be. And I spent time, I sacrificed not reading the Bible because of whatever bias was planted in my brain. And I spent a lot of time without going to church, even though I was supposed to go to my dad's church. And my dad understood exactly what I was going through at that time. And he said, you'll figure it out, like, I don't blame you, because you need to figure out what your relationship with God is like. That's what my dad said, even as a pastor. And he said, if that means that you don't have to spend time in church and you don't have to read the Bible, that's fine, as long as you come out the other end and make sure that you still have a relationship with God. So instead of having a bias with sermons, or letting sermons have a bias with the way I read the Bible, I said, I'm going to talk to God and I want to figure out who you are. Because I know that if I'm supposed to take the claim of what Jesus is for you and become that, like a son for you, then that means that I also need to learn who you are as a father to me and who I am to you as a son. And that's when all these painful prayers came out. And it was a process of re-identifying who I am. That's why you see these start very dark. And these last 3 books are basically the silver lining of the entire series.